fine citizenry in our community.
Yeah.
We always like to represent to you these special events that we have in our community. People of and organizations that have accomplished and are representing certain special areas of our community needs. And it's my great pleasure tonight to have, I believe, 5 organizations. I'd like to ask them to come up and stand here as we go through the process. And I'll be issuing a proclamation for each of these organizations. And what I'd like to do is start, would you identify your organization? So we go through and identify the principal person to introduce your organization. The name of your...
We're with Gavin's Galaxy.
Okay.
Transfer Hope Foundation, Big Love Cancer Care, Kids Are Strong Too,
Wonderful.
and Yellow Up.
Okay, fine, thank you. Let me get over by the microphone here. Can all of you hear me now? As you used to say in the television ad, can you hear me now? I have a proclamation that I will issue that is which is appropriate for each one of these individuals. It's about pediatric cancer. And they all have listed organizations are working to address this particular issue. And let me present the proclamation that will apply to each one of them, and each one of them will get a copy of this proclamation as well. Whereas the Society Fund for Children and Kid Cancer Connection report that cancer is the leading cause of death by disease amongst American children between infancy and age 15. This tragic disease is detected in nearly 16,000 of our country's young people each year, which is terrible. Whereas 1 in 5 of our nation's children loses his or her battle with cancer, and many infants, children, and teens will suffer from long-term effects of comprehensive treatment, including secondary cancer. Whereas while the cancer of childhood cancer are largely unknown, the American Cancer Society reports that advances in treatment have increased, and the overall 5-year survival rate is now approximately 80%, giving our children a better chance of having long and successful lives. And whereas throughout this month, we remember the children and families whose lives have been forever altered by childhood cancer, as well as the dedicated professionals, organizations, individuals, and communities who have supported and cared for them. Now, therefore, I, Tom Reed, by the power vested in me as the mayor of this fine city of Pearland, Texas, do hereby proclaim the month of September 2017 as Childhood Cancer Awareness Month. And I ask all citizens, both near and far, to join with me as we support cancer patients, survivors, their families, and caregivers, and remember the lives of those who have lost, and encourage those who are working to improve survival rates and treatments of these fine, devastating diseases. It's a great deal of pleasure. I gave this under my hand and seal of office today, September 18th, 2017, and signed it Tom Reed, Mayor of Pearland. And this represents the feeling and encouragement and support of our entire council and of our staff. And what I'd like to do is, I think we have addressed yourself individually of your organization, and I at least just 3 comments, real short. If you can do it in 1 minute, we can make it happen.
The reason I started Yellow Up, my oldest daughter is a 6-year survivor of 2 types of cancer, all at the same time. It was gonadoblastoma and dysgerminoma, which is the ovarian. So now we just help give back in various needs to help with little things that add up.
Okay.
It's Samantha Campbell, and we started Kids Are Strong Too in honor of this little guy right here. When he was 3, he battled
a rare form of lung cancer called pleuropulmonary blastoma. And this particular community surrounding Houston area supported us so heavily that we knew that we had to give back. And so with that, Kids Are Strong 2 was started. We support with special programs, scholarships, and research.
My name is Rafael De La Torre, and we began helping children that are fighting cancer in the Houston area and Pearland area. We provide them with basic, smaller expenses such as parking, meals, bills for rent, things like that. And we started back in 2014, based here in Pearland.
Wonderful.
I'm Shannon Murray, and I work for Big Love Cancer Care. Big is Brooke's incredible gift. Brooke was 5 years old and she died 10 years ago of leukemia. And her mother and father started this organization to help with the most immediate needs of cancer patients. And we're at 4 campuses now: Texas Children's and 3 Texas Children's campuses and Dell Children's in Austin. And right now we're really busy helping displaced families from Harvey with everything from Uber to chemo and housing.
Hi, we're Andrea and Scott Davidson. We're Pearland residents. We've lived here for 16 years. We founded the Chance for Hope Foundation in 2014 in memory of our son Chance, who passed away from brain cancer at the age of 13. Our organization provides free temporary housing for families who are traveling here to Texas to seek medical treatment for their children with cancer, as well as free meal deliveries and research grant funding.
I'm Jacqueline, this is Sam Abdel-Messiah. We started Gavin's Galaxy, and this is Gavin right now, who is currently still being treated at Texas Children's. The biggest thing I want you to take away is we just came back from a trip from DC. Our biggest thing is advocacy, and our biggest thing that we kept saying, that I had the hardest time saying when we were marching on our way to the National Mall, was, please don't look the other way. You might be marching with us one day. Remember that.
In closing, I'd like to say thank you, Mayor Reed and City Council, for inviting us. This is an incredibly important issue. Obviously, 6 organizations here in Pearland is a very important topic to all of us. Our children are extremely important. For those of you that don't know, Mayor Reed is an amazing individual. We've done 23 proclamations around the country, which was inspired by Mayor Reed. Last year at Centennial Park, Mayor Reed told me that I should reach out to other cities after agreeing to do it for Pearland, and I did, not knowing what the result would be. And 23 cities later, this has been a national movement because of Mayor Reed and the city of Pearland being so supportive of what we do here. So thank you for that on behalf of all the organizations here.
I agree with you. Ladies and gentlemen, these are people working to save lives for our youth. How can you thank people like this? What can you do to help them? We'll hear from that as we go through the process. I'm going to be inviting these back in smaller groups so that we can have them up here before our council with a little bit more of an explanation, since we don't have that much time to listen to each one of them in more detail. So thank all of you for being here tonight. Keep the job going. I appreciate what you're doing. I think it's fabulous and I think it's wonderful.
We have some pins we'd like to present to the City Council this time. These gold pediatric cancer. Gold is a precious metal, and in the month of September, I'd like to ask that we have enough for each City Council member, the City Manager, and several members of the city to have one of these pins. But we'd like to ask you that you wear these pins to honor the children that are fighting, the ones that are angels now and the ones that have battled.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here tonight. We'll be back and hear some more about this over the time as we can afford to work you in. Thank you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a regular meeting of City Council, City of Pearland for Monday, September 13th, year 2017. If you please rise with heaven invocation and a pledge of allegiance by our police chief, John Fraser. Lord, if you will join with me as we call upon the Lord to let us recognize his benevolence and his contribution to all of us, regardless of our race, color, religion, or ethnicity. Lord, we love you, and we know that you love us because you show us in so very, very many ways. You've given us beautiful days and a terrible introduction to nature at its worst, with Harvey visiting with us, and we know that there are many people who have suffered grievously, and we are very unhappy about the results of what we have seen in some areas. But we're also delighted by the fact that you have stood beside us, and there are so many people across the country have been killed by this grievous hurricane, but in Pearland we did not suffer a loss of life, and for that we thank you and praise you for that. And Lord, as we go through life, we know that we have to depend on others, and we have to depend on them for our well-being and for our survival. But we also depend on you, Lord, for your guidance, your help, and your just reaching out and being with us when we are in need. And I think that's extremely important during these times when we are faced with such diversity and things that happen that we do not have words to even describe or express our feelings about. But we are happy today that we are recovering. We're making great progress. Be with each and every one of these individuals, Lord. We love you, and we know that you have watched over us with care, and your guidance was always of help. And as we go through the days and the years in the future, cleaning up after Harvey, we know that you will be watching, and you'll be guiding, and you'll be with each and every one of us. So we ask that you be there when we need you. And thank you, Lord, for what you have done for all of us in the past. And Lord, also, as we leave today, be with each and every one of us as we go to our homes. For these things we ask in your name for your sake. Lord, amen.
You would face the flag and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And to the Texas flag.
Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
I want to thank each and every one of you for being here tonight. I know that we do have a long agenda, and that's because Pearland is growing, and we have an awful lot to take care of. And a lot of these items were things that we've had in process that were part of our budget for the 2017-2018 fiscal year. And we will be addressing a number of those tonight, but we're also addressing other issues that are part of the growth and progress of Pearland. And I think we all should be very, very proud of our community and what we've accomplished. And as we go through the process, we do that with people and before you as your city council. I would like to report to the city, Mr. Secretary, that Councilmember Reed will not be with us tonight.
He's on his way.
If he gets here in time, we will be okay, but he is not in the audience at the present time. And we are very happy with what they are accomplishing and working on at the present time, what he is working on at the present time. Moving to the consent agenda, which represents items A through C on our agenda tonight. If you don't have a copy of the agenda, I think we might have some extra copies at the back. I'm not quite sure whether they're enough for each and every one of you, but are there any items to be removed from the consent agenda at this point? Hearing none, I'll ask our standby expert on consent agendas, Councilmember Carbone, to present this for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, approval of consent agenda items A through C. So moved. Second.
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Are there any items that the council has an opinion on as to at this point? And hearing none, Mr. Secretary, we do have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0 with Councilmember Reed and Moore absent from the chambers.
Okay. We do have an individual that would like to make a few comments. Craig Bailey, citizen to be heard. There he is at the back. I see him now. Thank you for being here. Come on up to the podium and share your thoughts with us.
Mayor Reed, Council, Mr. Pearson. My name is Craig Bailey, Mayor of Brookside Village. As we all know, Hurricane Harvey dealt both cities a harsh blow with flooding. 90 to 95% of the homes in Brookside flooded. Our resources were stretched thin and we were looking for local help. Even with Pearland dealing with its own problems, Pearland administration immediately stepped up and provided us with many valuable resources. To name the top three was police protection, fresh water, and hot meals. In the days following the storm, Brookside saw hundreds of sightseeing vehicles passing through our city. I was asked numerous times about police protection by our citizens. With all their possessions outside drying, they were concerned with thefts. On behalf of Brookside Village, I can't say thank you enough to Mr. Pearson, Mayor Reed, City Council, Chief Spires, Assistant Chief Randall, and Assistant Chief Frazier for allowing police protection during our time of need. The citizens were so thankful to see the extra Pearland police units in our city 24 hours a day, protecting everything they owned. Thank you to the kind-hearted citizens, businesses, churches, mosques, and the Pearland Neighborhood Center who reached out to us. We are very grateful. Truth be told, it would have been extremely difficult to survive without each and every one of their donations. In closing, Brookside Village says thank you for all your support. If we can ever help you in any way, it'd be our pleasure. Thank you.
Convey with your council and citizens that we were regretful of the loss and that we really appreciate your comments and thank you so much. You've been a great community, sister city, and we appreciate what you have accomplished, and what you're doing now is recovery. Thank you so much. Moving in, the next item is the new business. I'll ask Councilmember Carbone if he'll present item 1 for our consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1544, an ordinance appropriation adopting a budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 17, ending September 30, 18, and pay plans for fiscal year 2018. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is the next to last meeting where we're going to be dealing with budget for the upcoming fiscal year starting October 1. We've been at this from council side at least since early August through a series of presentations and meetings and discussions and going back and forth. This particular item is, as was read, the actual budget for the upcoming fiscal year and the pay plan for the fiscal year that does include the two different implementations, one for October and then another one for April, based upon all the prior discussions when it comes to the pay plan. So recommend your consideration and approval as we can move forward and get after the next fiscal year.
Okay, any comments from council at this point? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Ordinance 1544 is approved on the first reading, 5-0.
That information in the record. Let's move then to item number 2 on our agenda. Councilmember Ordino, would you present this for our consideration?
I move that the property tax rate be increased to the adoption of a tax rate of 0.685059, which is effectively a 2.7% increase in the tax rate. So moved.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thanks, sir. This is, as was read, the actual property tax rate from the city side. This represents between 20 and 30% of the total tax bill that a property owner would receive. This is based upon valuations from January 1 of 2017. So we need this revenue for operations, pays for the police, fire, public works, parks and recreation, essential services that are offered to the citizens, the community throughout the year. It also pays for all of our debt service, for repaying capital bond financing. This represents the rate that was just read as the rollback rate, which is a state calculation that recognizes growth, but is not at what the council at least considered in some of the earlier discussions going up to this 7.0. It's obviously also above the effective rate, so it's somewhere in the middle of that. But I do recommend your consideration and approval to move forward on this for the first reading.
I think that even with this small amount as compared to the tremendous damage we've had in the community to our infrastructure, to roads, water, and facilities, or a number of things that we have to prepare for, like we had to hire the organization that came down with trucks to haul off the trash and things of that type, that I think this is going to be able to get us by on pretty well on that, so I think it's a good move in our part. Does council have any questions or comment on this point? Hearing none, we do have motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Ardno?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens? Aye. Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Ordinance 1545 was approved on its first reading, 5-0, with Councilmember Reed and Councilmember Moore absent from the chambers.
Okay, with that information in the record, let's then move to item 3 on our agenda. Councilmember Little, would you present this for our consideration?
Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 1404-3, an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Pearland, Texas, amending section 1811 of chapter 18 municipal court of the City of Pearland Code of Ordinances that is manager fee, providing a repealing clause, a saving clause, a severability clause, and providing for codification. So moved.
Okay. With that information, we have a motion second. With that information in the record, staff report.
Thanks, sir. This is specific to our municipal court system, paying for some of the costs, the overhead for case managers, and adjusting the fees to recognize the costs that come along with that.
Okay. Council have any question or comment on this item? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens? Owens? Carbone?
Aye.
Ardno?
Aye.
Ordinance 1404-, 5-0, with Councilmember Reed and Moore absent from the chambers.
And we have our municipal judge in the audience back there, and he's no audience. She's in the audience tonight, and this will be something that she can use with great dispatch. Mostly, and I see her smiling back there because it's something we really need. Moving in our agenda, new business item number 4, Councilmember Perez.
Thank you, Mayor.
Present this for our consideration.
Yes, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, ordinance number 1023-7. So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
So this it was one of our fee ordinances, user fees for people that are going through the development permit processes.
trying to take a look at those at least on somewhat a regular basis to make sure that those are, if not substantially, totally covering their costs of the goods provided. And so we recommended this. There was some discussion about at least one of those items, but for the purposes of the presentation, it's, I believe, as presented earlier what council was saying.
Okay, does the council have any question or comment on this item? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Pavone.
Aye.
Councilmember Orno.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Ordinance 1023-7 was approved 5-0. Councilmember Reed and more absent from the chamber.
Moving in our agenda to item number 5, Councilmember Owens, would you to the honor?
Consideration possible action first reading of ordinance number 1358-15. So moved.
Second.
Have a motion and a second, we have discussion, staff report.
So Mayor and Council, this is the non-development user fees. This encompasses predominantly our water and sewer systems. We have water and sewer utility businesses that operate on the funds derived from payments for water and services provided. And we've gone through an exhaustive process. We had actually adjusted last year the fee structure. Modernizing that and recognizing the system that we have that we're trying to build out, the fees that were recommended. You've seen the justification in terms of increased costs and so forth, and we're obligated to pay for not only the operations and the debt service, but also have bond covenants, which requires us to have additional revenues in the bank, ratios that we have to meet our bond covenants. So it's important that obviously that we're required to meet all of those, and this accomplishes that.
Does council have any question or comment on this item?
Mayor, I got a question.
Yes, sir.
And it's on the false alarm fee. I've had a few people contacting me on there that evidently their alarm went off and the police came out by there, and then it comes back as they get the letter on a false alarm, and they're saying, well, maybe someone was there and they left when the alarm went off. How do we know that? So there's a question about that, if it was a false alarm, or if there was somebody there trying to get into somebody's house and they left when the alarm went off or whatever, then we charge them for a false alarm. Anybody have any kind of answer for that?
We can provide some, but rest assured that false alarms are a big deal. I mean, you've seen some of the numbers I believe council has in terms of the demand on our services. It does create safety issues for not only the transit of the officers when they're going to a call, but then once they're there. So we do everything we can to make sure we work with entities that may have the highest amount of those and try to figure out how they can fix their systems. But before you get into a fine situation, you get a couple of passes, and so I guess maybe they could say that, but I highly doubt 5. So it take a lot of people wiggling on a door to generate that kind of.
Just a question I've been asked, so I thought I'd ask it along. I think I'm up to
Any other comments from council at this point? Very good. We do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Pavone.
Aye.
Councilmember Orno.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Ordinance 1358-15 was approved on the first reading, 5-0 with Councilmember Reed and more absent from the chamber.
Moving back to our agenda, item number 6, Councilmember Crumble, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, resolution 2017-189, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. State staff report.
I'm tired of talking, so let's try to talk about this. Yes.
This is a asphalt overlay project on Hatfield Road that was bid, and it includes Hatfield, basically from 518 up to Hickory Slough, and then actually Hickory Slough up to Northern City Limits is included in one of the alternates that was recommended for award. We received 5 bid proposals and recommend awarding the contract to AAA Asphalt Paving in the amount of $774,002.50. And this is out of our annual funding for asphalt street reconstruction and replacement.
Only add, Mr. Brandon, that we did get positive, good pricing compared to what we had estimated, and so we're going to be able to at least look at rededicating some of that money to some of our other work that's storm at least initiated.
Council, have a question or comment on that, Adam?
Yes, Mayor. So, get back to that. So we're gonna be milling up the existing asphalt and reliving it and emulsifying it on spot. And then, what is our plan for attacking the base material? Are we going to be milling it, doing spot repair of the base? Are we doing holistic repair of the base?
Spot repairs of the base as you're traveling north on Hatfield. As you're traveling north on Hatfield, the eastern 4 feet of the roadway were added, I believe, in the 70s. We're going to rework that base. The borings that were done there showed that we have 12 inches of base material under there, so it's a good base, and it's just to make it a homogeneous roadway surface for the entire stretch.
One, I would thank y'all for putting this together. I know the road needs some repair. I really wanted to, one, feel comfortable that what we're going to do is going to be slightly more than a Band-Aid, but it's still a Band-Aid. And also make note of the fact that our budget for next year's roadway improvements is $1.1 million, and this is taking up 3/4 of it. And this is basically all we can do in a year. Unless I'm getting my numbers wrong, I think that's pretty much where we are for roadway improvements, correct?
This is the FY17 budget still.
No, I appreciate that. I'm pointing out value to what we're budgeting. For what we're budgeting, $1.1 million, we can do about one road with a Band-Aid approach. I think, I'm not arguing with the benefit of the project. We obviously need it. I'm just arguing with the fact that we need to give ourselves more money to be able to attack these roads. This road needs to be ripped out and done in concrete. And what we're going to do is we're going to mill it down. We're going to reuse the existing material to try and cheapen the project, which we need to do. We're not addressing the drainage. We're not addressing the utilities. None of the road is not actually going to get improved. It's just going to get Band-Aided over. In about 5 to 10 years, it's going to need to be. I think this project really highlights to me how anemic our roadway improvement budget is, and we need to find a better way to fund these projects, or we will never catch up with the roads that we need to improve. I think staff's doing the best they can. We've talked about this when we talked about the Orange Street project. We need to be out of the overlay business. Asphalt is just a failed product with our soils. It doesn't work very well. I think we see that in the older sections, but we can't afford to do anything else. So obviously I'll approve the project. I want us to move forward because the road needs it, but we've got to we as a council have to find a better way to get this done in the future, or we're just going to have a bunch of roads that are falling apart with nowhere near enough funding to do it, not giving our staff anywhere near the tools and the resources they need to attack these problems. That's all I have to say, Mayor.
I had a question on the asphalt The asphalt streets that we put in recently, they're fabulous. I was just really impressed, and I had a lot of compliments from the citizens that, Jesus, that the third floor is moving furniture, or there's something else happening out there. Let's hope it's furniture. But there have been a lot of compliments, so I don't know what this, is this the same applying contractor?
Our roadway project consists of the city doing the work, the county coming in and doing the work with us, and this year, our work with the county concentrated in the Old Town area. And this is where we bring in a contractor on top of that, because our agreement with the county only gets us so far, and we have money in excess of that, so we bring in a contractor to typically do one.
There's some good asphalt roads out there. It's supposed to have a better center stripe on it, though. Any other comment or question, Council? Hearing none, Mr. Secretary, we have a motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Barlow? Aye. Councilmember Reeves? Councilmember Orville? Aye. Councilmember Little? Aye. Councilmember Perez? Aye. Councilmember Owens? Aye. Resolution 2017 money unanimously approved 5-0 with one exception.
Okay, moving in our, sorry.
Councilmember Moore?
Okay. Moving in our agenda to item number 7, Councilmember Reed, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000-M-163. So moved. Second.
Motions. The first one, we do have motion second on the floor here. And we do have a staff report is going to report on the process of the results of the planning and zoning annual meetings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This request is a change in zoning from SR 15 to general commercial. The property was annexed into the city in December of 2015. It's generally located at 6630 Bailey Road. The property is currently developed with a residence and a custom car shop. The applicant, even though this is a zone change, the applicant has informed staff that they wish to develop an office and a warehouse for to sell online goods. And the future land use designation of the property is low density residential. And there was a JPH held on August 7th for this request. Staff has received only one notice in opposition of the request. We received 2 phone calls just to inquire about the proposal. And one person spoke during the JPH in favor of the request. That person stated that they were hoping for some type of improvements on the existing custom car shop. In regards to the conformance table, the property is not in conformance with most of our criteria, with the exception of the thoroughfare plan. The reason for the yellow background under the UDC, regardless of the zone change happening or not, there will still be some non-conforming uses on the property, meaning that the residents, if the zone change happens, will be in the non-conforming use. If the zone change doesn't happen, the custom car shop will remain a non-conforming use. P&Z did not recommend approval by a vote of 0 to 4. Some of the discussions that were raised during PDC, there was a lengthy discussion regarding non-conforming versus conforming uses. PDC also felt that this particular request constituted in a spot zoning. Some questions, other questions were raised by P&Z were, can the applicant build an accessory building? The applicant requested to build a 10,000 square foot building. The UDC cites a limitation on accessory buildings. There can be greater than 50% of the living space of the residents or 5% of the entire lot. Another question that was actually came up or raised during the P&Z meeting was, can they have a home occupation? A home occupation is allowed by the UDC. However, in regards to home occupations, there's another space requirement and size requirement that the UDC cites, that the home occupation can't be greater than 25% of the residents. So So this concludes staff report, and Exhibit 1 and Exhibit 2 shows an aerial view and the zoning map of the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, that information in the record. Does that complete your staff report at this point?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Council have any questions or comment on this item? Hearing none, then we do have motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Wardell.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
No.
Councilmember Perez.
No.
Councilmember Owens.
No.
Councilmember Colon.
No.
Motion failed. Ordinance 22,163, 6-0.
I voted yes. I don't want it doesn't really matter. It's still
It matters. It matters.
Does that get the count right? Okay, good. That information in the record, then let's move down to item number 8 on our agenda. Councilman Ordino.
Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number CUP 17-00014. So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Motion and second, for discussion for staff report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. This is a request to amend the previously approved CUP. The CUP was previously approved in 2014 to permit a skilled nursing facility. It's generally located west side of the Business Center Drive and north of County Road 59. The proposed site has 2 out parcels from a larger tract. The current zoning is BP 288. There is a future land use designation of 288 Gateway, and there is a JPH held on this particular request on September 11th. This is a view of the newly revised site plan that shows the 2 out parcels. Staff has only received 2 phone calls to inquire about the project. This request is in conformance with all of staff's review criteria, and PD&Z recommend approval of the request by a vote of 5-0. Exhibit 1 shows an aerial map of the proposed property, as well as a zoning map, Exhibit 2. And this completes staff report, sir.
That completes your staff report at this point.
Yes, sir.
Does council have any question or comment regarding this report from our staff on this item?
Yes, Mayor. Question for the attorney. So, if we happen to adopt the changes to the ZUP, which pull out some of these requirements that these CUPs or modified CUPs are having to go through, that will affect this CUP now in the future, correct? Because what we're changing is changing that to a resolution. This will be accepted by ordinance, which means no matter what we do in the future, any change or modification of the CUP.
3 seconds.
So any modification of the CUP will be required to change my ordinance, correct?
That is correct. It's similar, we used to have another process that we called them SUPs, and we actually considered those zone changes back then. For the same reason, those are actually considered zone changes that have to be changed accordingly. This would actually be an ordinance that could only be modified by amending that ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
Any other comments or questions? Hearing none, we do have motion second on the floor.
Councilmember Wardell.
Aye.
Councilmember Little. Aye. Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Colon.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Ordinance CUP 17-00014 approved 6-0 on its first reading.
Let's move to item number 9 on our new business agenda. Councilmember Little, would you present this for our consideration?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration and possible action, first reading of ordinance number 2000T-46, so moved.
Second.
So I think, Mayor, you're also going to see the screen in front of you, Jay, if you can just go through. Yeah, we can see this front of that.
So, Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a request for the proposed amendments to the Unified Development Code. There are 3 proposed amendments. The first one is changes to the land use matrix, and there's 3 potential changes to the land use matrix. The first change involves lumber mills and lumber yards, and is permitted by a CUP in the following districts: GC, M1, and M2. I just want to make reference that this change is not for any retail sales for lumber. For instance, particular stores like Pearland Lumber, Ace Hardware, Lowe's, and Home Depot will not be included in this change. This is only for milling or manufacturing companies that actually mill wood. The second change to the land use matrix is changes to the open air market. And this is to only permit by CUP in the S1, S2, S3, OT/GB, GB, GC, and M1 districts. And the third change to the land use matrix is to allow transfer stations and similar uses to only be permitted by a CUP in the GC, M1, and M2 districts. The second revision to the UDC is a revision to the CUP process. And the third revision is a revision to the tree farms and nurseries in the UDC exemptions. We received no public comments, phone calls, or notices in regards to this zone change. And PDC recommended an approval of this request by a vote of 4-0. Mr. Mayor, this concludes staff's report.
Okay. That information to the record. Does council have any question or comment at this point?
Yeah. 2 things. I kind of wanted this split out earlier. I have the issue with open air markets needing the CUP no matter where they go. Farmers market's a perfect example of that. It's an open air market. I don't know how else that would be designated. Also, the tree farms, I don't believe we even need this after the action the state took. The action the state took. Tree protection, that's the state, I believe.
Any further comment by council? Hearing none, we do have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Orlando?
No.
Ordinance 2000T-26 was approved at 5-1 with Councilmember Moore absent.
Okay, moving in our agenda, item number 10, Councilmember Prentice, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, first reading is ordinance number CUP 17-00013, so moved. Second.
We have a motion second, we're in discussion, staff report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a proposal to allow a liquor and package store in the general business district. The general location is 2708 Pearland Parkway. The property was developed as a shopping center. It has a proposed site of 2,900 square feet. There's a future land use destination of retail, office, and services. There was a JPH held on this request on August 7, 2017. Exhibit 6 shows the buffer map. So essentially, that shows the subject property along with all of the other either approved or pending applications in regards to liquor and package stores within a 2-mile buffer radius. This is a view of the site plan that was submitted with the application. The request is in conformance with all 5 review criteria. 2 people spoke during the JPH in opposition of the request. The concerns were generated traffic might potentially increase by allowing this use, and then they didn't feel that this was the best fit for this property, or this use wasn't the best fit for the property. P&Z recommended not to approve the request by a vote of 2 to 2. It was a tied vote, but a tied vote constitutes a negative recommendation for P&Z. Some of the concerns that were brought up in P&Z, they really want the city to actually take a really good look and get a handle on how we cite these type of uses. Just for reference, at the next P&Z meeting, staff will have a discussion on these particular uses and bring forth best practices on how other communities handle these particular uses. Exhibit 1 and 2 shows the area map and the zoning map. And Mr. Mayor, this concludes staff's report.
That application is ordered. Does council have any question or comment at this point?
Yes, Mayor. With so much kind of up in the air about how we want to treat these in the future and some of the discussions had, I want to move that we postpone the vote for this until we have finalized any changes to the EDC as far as how we're going to make any modifications to give guidance to where we're going to allow these liquor stores in the future.
Second.
We have a motion to postpone this item. Any other comment by council?
Just real quick, just so I'm clear, we would need a supermajority in order for this to pass.
No, we do not.
They're not considered zone changes under our ordinance, and because it's not a zone change, it would just simply require
A supermajority is not required on this particular item. Okay, we do have
I don't think postpone, but that's just me.
I think it's just fair to the applicant and fair to the people who have voiced opposition enough to where we've discussed making modifications that we should postpone this and have this treated in the merits of what we're going to change it to as opposed to some interim condition.
Well, if we did that, and I'm for postponing, but if something comes up to where this applicant ends up not being able to go forward because of our postponement, because of any possible changes, then what happens? We're not screwing them.
I mean, I appreciate that, but that's kind of buyer beware. He should have been aware of the possibility he wouldn't get the use before he went forward.
Right, but not that we would change.
That's the change the process in the middle of it.
I'm not.
I mean, that's my issue.
You know, I don't disagree, but I don't disagree with that perspective of it. But are we willing to allow this use and other uses to go through in an interim? Or are we going to allow them? I already know what your answer is.
Okay.
Or do we want to give this guy an opportunity? I think there's a good chance this may fail. We're going to give him an opportunity for us to space them out and give them better guidance as to if this fails, we're going to fail, or we're just going to say it's going to be a yes or no tonight, and then in the future we deal with it.
Well, so we don't need supermajority, and maybe I should have asked that before I seconded it. Then, no, I think it passes tonight.
But we still got to vote on the postponement.
Yeah, I think so. We have a motion and a second.
If we vote not to postpone, then we can vote on the merits of this.
We can go ahead and vote. We can go ahead and vote on this.
But to clarify, with the changes we just voted on the first reading to change the CV process, even if this got voted down tonight, it could be heard and decided in one meeting in the future.
Yeah.
That is correct.
So there's no need to postpone it, we'll vote it up or down. And it doesn't delay the process, even when it goes down.
So we need to vote down the postpone.
Okay, we do have a motion second on the floor for a postponement. Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez?
Yes.
Councilmember Owen?
Aye.
Councilmember Carvalho?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Ordino?
No.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Postponement, that motion failed, 4-2.
Mr. Mayor,
So we have a motion on the table.
there was a question,
I think needs clarifying just process-wise, because if it fails on first reading, it wouldn't come back for a second. Is that, I just want to make sure that.
That's correct. If it fails tonight, it's failed. I think Councilmember Carbone is saying that they could reapply and come back and have it heard in one meeting under the new process.
But they'd have to go through the whole process.
That is correct. There would still be another public hearing.
But it does not need a supermajority.
That's correct.
Okay. And you did record the vote to fail. Okay, just one. Let's move into item number 11. I was hearing something else that you were going to forget it all, come back again with a fresh start. We're not on the first start. Okay. We do have, I need a motion. Before it fails. All right.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
No.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
Aye.
CUP 17-00013, approved 5-1. Councilmember Moran?
I thought maybe Mother Nature would thunder again in her disapproval. But she didn't. Thank goodness. Okay. We're now on new business item number 11, which is the ones.
Consideration of possible action, second reading, final reading of ordinance number 2000-M-162 as amended.
Okay, before we start, we do have a motion second on the floor.
Second. Yes.
Okay, we had a vote on the other, we do have a motion second on the floor. Okay, we have two citizens who will speak. Aaron Lloyd. Aaron Lloyd, whatever he is. Which Lloyd is it?
He's Aaron, my name is Paul Glenn.
Huh?
My name is Paul Glenn, this is Aaron Lloyd.
Are you a tag team?
Yes, sir.
Oh, good. Well, get up, both of you get up there. Paul Glenn, I was going to give you one at a time, but you're going to talk together.
Great.
Okay.
Thanks for having us out. My name is Paul Glenn. I'm the HR manager for Third Coast Terminals. Jim Clausen started our business. It's a small family-owned business that we started in mid-90s. Jim still owns the plant today. We have about 180 full-time employees. And before you're going to have an opportunity to change the zoning from an industrial zone to a planned development. And we're going to ask you to vote against that. Why would the HR guy be here talking to the city council? This is not my environment. I'm out of my league here. What I am worried about is our employees' jobs. Full-time, excellent paid employee jobs that we started in the mid-90s, investing in the property, and tonight has big impact for our employees. And so that's my request of you is very simple. To vote no, to stick with the status quo, and don't allow this change to jeopardize the full-time jobs that we have built in Pearland starting from 1997.
Okay, appreciate your comments.
City Council, Mayor, thank you for allowing us to address you. My name is Aaron Lloyd. I am an attorney for Third Coast. Specifically, the second reading for the City Council tonight is to change the zoning of a property that borders Third Coast. The current zoning for that property is for light industrial, and this zoning change sought is to take the property, the front of the property, it would be commercial, and the rear to planned use development. This change would have a material adverse effect on Third Coast and its business operations. Specifically, dividing the property between Third Coast and the subject property is a railroad track. As the industrial use of the town, Third Coast is kind of focused around its ability to move rail. Third Coast produces consumer and manufacturer-grade chemicals in Pearland. Although Third Coast is a small company, still owned by Mr. Clausen, Third Coast actually has a worldwide reach. They have affiliates in Asia affiliates in the Middle East, but Pearland continues to be their home. Third Coast's largest facility and most employees are located in Pearland. As Mr. Glenn said, there are approximately 180 employees. Third Coast is the producer of chemicals. They produce chemicals by two different specifically stratified processes. One is blending, and the other one is chemical reactions. In that regard, in order to operate their distillation columns, their blending tanks, and their reaction column, they are required to get permits that comply with various rules the EPA, the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. When they make application for permits, which they often have to do as part of a change in product mix or a request for customer or potential new line of business, they have to submit to the various regulatory authorities what is within the scope of their property and the neighboring areas. They are then called to account for what those properties are. As it currently stands, that process is somewhat simplified. As much as anything can be simplified when you're manufacturing chemicals these days, because their neighboring properties are zoned as light industrial. The change being sought by the neighboring property to disturb the status quo would change that process. Not even addressing the future issues, my crystal ball's currently on fritz, but the future issues that may result from trying to run a chemical processing facility is the current rules. So within the current rules, calling to account for that, and unfortunately I can't go into too much specifics, but I would entertain questions from council about the specifics. But specifically, by having a non-industrial use in the area, that's a tier classification of the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality. And so once you have neighbors that are non-industrial, okay, what are those neighbors and what do they do? That process could inhibit Third Coast's ability to not only expand their product lines and do new work, but could also affect their ability to produce the products that they currently make. I would like to make it clear that Third Coast is not against their neighbors. Third Coast has neighbors. Third Coast has had neighbors for a long time and will continue to have neighbors. However, just as it would be a bad idea for Third Coast to try to produce a chemical manufacturing plant near a retail facility, we think it's a bad idea to change the rules now that Third Coast is already in to allow someone else to build commercial sites and retail development near Third Coast Chemical Facility.
Good. I appreciate those comments. Thank you so much. Staff report.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, this is a request for the approval of a PD with a base zone of M1 and GC. I just want to reiterate that this PD is for the entire parcel. There's a two-phase development approach to the PD where they're going to be they're proposing to do general commercial in the front of the property and light industrial in the back. Currently, the property is zoned light industrial, and there's a future land use designation of industrial and public versus semi-public. There's a JPH held on the request on July 17th, and first reading took place on August 14th. So here's a site plan showing the proposal. As you can see, the retail commercial is in the front portion of the PD, and the back portion of the PD is being requesting light industrial. There's a rendering of phase 1, which is the commercial property, and then there's the rendering of the industrial phase of the PD. So this request was in conformance with all of the code criteria, with the exception of one, which is platting. So if approved, the applicant will need to plat the property. This is second reading. So following the JPH and first reading, council asked staff to reach back out to the applicant as well as Third Coast because they share concerns over the use table. So staff actually tried to attempt to reach out to Third Coast prior to the first reading and was not successful. But staff did actually reach back out and was able to receive some literature from Third Coast sharing their concerns with the uses. They were more in particular concerned about building 16, which is the building in the back, and building 11, which is the building in the back, and 16 additional uses that were outlined in the use table for M1. However, all 16 of these uses are allowed by right now in the UDC. Therefore, if the applicant were to come and had the desire to build any of the uses that are outlined in the proposed use table, they don't actually have to come for a zone change or CUP. They can actually just go get a permit and build any of the uses that are outlined in the use table right now. Staff did actually find 4 uses that were included in the use table by mistake. Since the first reading, those uses have been removed. The uses include cemetery, child daycare, nursery, a cigarette, tobacco shop, and a cinema. And the applicant also agreed to replicate the UDC in regards to uses being allowed in the M1 district. So any use now in the UDC that's allowed by right or by a CUP is also allowed by right or a CUP in this proposed PD. Also, P&Z recommended approval of the PD by a vote of 6-0, and the request passed first reading. Exhibit 1 shows an aerial map of the proposal, and Exhibit 2 shows the zoning map. And that concludes staff report.
And the information in the record, let's let the council respond with their comments at this point.
President Mayor, I know when we first met on this, and staff was working toward putting the 2 parties together to try to work out some private agreement. Has there been any progress on that?
So staff has actually reached out to the applicant and Third Coast. Following the first reading, staff did receive some information from Third Coast with their concerns. And then we also, reached back out to the applicant. However, staff, this is above a zoning use. Staff only has the authority to speak to zoning, and in regards to zoning, all of the zoning that the applicant is actually required by right in the UDC currently. So staff is willing to continue conversations, but this is definitely not a zoning matter. So in regards to pulling zoning, that's already allowed by right. Staff doesn't have the authority to do so.
I understand that. Do you know if there's been any communication between the applicant and Third Coast?
Staff has actually been the mediator between that communication. So directly, I'm not familiar with direct communication between.
We got Third Coast right here.
Have you guys had any
Y'all not met with
communication
them?
directly with them?
Is there a reason why y'all haven't met with them?
I would tell you that I proposed a couple of different changes to try. I would tell you that I tried to make some changes to what was suggested through the staff. Hey, here's things that I have concerns about. I got the answer of no. How about building 11? No. Okay, then I don't know what else I can do as just trying to protect the jobs that we have. It seems like they're putting the burden on me to come up with the answer how we can make it work. I've tried 2 different things. Both of those were answered with no. So I'm then asking for you to maintain the status quo, say no to this zoning change, and let's move forward.
And I believe that's what I heard from staff was the uses would stay as they are in M1.
Yeah.
But y'all have issues with
those
uses that are currently allowed.
Absolutely, that piece is true. The change to the general commercial in the front, I have objection to that too.
But if the uses stay the same in the entire PD, what's the difference?
So, what's the reason for the change to general commercial? That's the part I'm not.
It's a planned development. So it's not a zone thing.
I would say this: the uses, they want to buy the land and they want to make a change, and they have a right to get the maximum value out of their land. I think, with respect to the burden being on you, yes, the burden is on you. You're the one that's affected. They are not. It's their land. It's them that want to maximize their value, but you want to maximize yours. If you want to come to a compromise, I don't think there's a whole lot of negotiations that start off, you change and we give up nothing.
No.
If you wanted to protect the jobs, the land was available to purchase. The solution for anybody who wants to affect the zoning of another land in a guaranteed form is to own the land. It's not really our job to pick favorites. If you're asking us, I think they've given some compromise by trying to mimic what is there, so that there is minimal effect on Third Coast to what was already allowed before. So there really is minimal change, if not no change, because they're mimicking what is allowed by right. So all of the uses that y'all said that y'all have concerns with, those can occupy in there already.
Everything. There's no reason to change.
There is reason to change. They have some things that they want to do in the zone change that they're trying to implement through a plan development process. The uses they've compromised on. Your concern is the uses. There are other things in the PD that they would like some concessions on. That's what they're negotiating with the city. The front part being commercial, but the back part in one mimicking those uses. It should be no change to you.
Here's what I was trying to do. I was trying to come up with a way to allow the city to move forward with general commercial, with changing something that's industrial today to general commercial. That's a change. That's a change that affects us. That's a change that will affect our permitting process. That's a change that affects jobs, good, industrial, excellent pay jobs in the city of Pearland.
All we can say is that they could have gone forward with these types of uses without the zone change.
I think Mr. Buchanan and PBC have been working with the owners of the property, and they're the ones that are seeking a planned development, which explain the PD and what they're trying to do.
So the trade-off here for the city and for the applicant, Mr. Rohr, is that we're going to get higher quality standard buildings than he would otherwise be created for the additional uses he's going to be allowed in the general commercial. Now, the general commercial is 670 feet from the property line of Third Coast. And obviously, if those are going to affect Third Coast's operation, I would think the Pearland Administration Building would also have affected their use at some point, because there's hundreds of people that are in that building right now that are in the same distance. And this is no different than Third Coast has planned development on their property. Their property is not straight zoned either. They came to the city, they had M1, M2, they needed M2. They did a planned development just like the applicant's doing. So this is not and the attorney that just got up misspoke because there's not a PD zoning. It is a M1 zoning at the back. And it has the exact identical uses that are allowed in M1 right now. So there is no change to the back parcel. Only the front parcel, we're allowing some more GC uses. But if you look at the building, the style of building they're building, it's more of an industrial field building. I think it's going to probably be a plumber that wants a shop, maybe a electrician, your mechanics, your trades, those kinds of things. It's not like it's geared to be a daycare or a fast food restaurant. It's more of an industrial feel, and that's what we've been working on with Mr. Rohr for the whole time, is to have some heavier buildings at the back and some lighter buildings at the back. But as you know, our general commercial and M1 zoning districts have a lot of overlap, and there are some of those GC uses he'd like to have the opportunity to have in those front buildings. So I think it's a very fair PD. It's really getting us a higher quality of building, better landscaping than we otherwise be allowed, but we're giving up nothing on the uses. The uses at the back are still the exact same uses that anyone could build and impact Third Coast today. So that's why getting them together, I didn't really see what the real value of getting them together was, because I don't really know what the compromise would be between the two parties.
Let me ask you a question, and probably maybe Paul might be able to answer. When we were in here a couple of weeks ago and talked about this, I think you're looking at increasing your business over there, hiring additional people on. And from what I understand, anytime you make any kind of chemical change, you have to get another permit.
That's correct.
And does the permit by the EPA, how far does that go out? Does it include those buildings over there in the footage on permits? Either one of you can answer, I don't care.
So, with clarification that I'm not an environmental engineer or environmental lawyer, I have spoken to Third Coast Environmental Consultants. Specifically, the way that the permitting process works is that there's different tiers of scrutiny that are given to permits. The first tier of scrutiny determines whether or not there is a structure within 500 feet of the emitter, so to speak. In this case, our emitter would be our reaction column. And so within 500 feet, you have that certain process. Once there is something within 500 feet, then you look. Okay. So once there is something within that 500 feet, then you look at the larger areas. So having a clear 500 feet gives you a more simple process. But once you're past the 500 feet, then it's kind of all game, and everything is considered. As correctly stated, there is the building there that I believe that the city or the school district is using. However, that building operates within something that it's my understanding is classified as light industrial because there's an exemption. Is that not the case?
No.
Okay. Well,
I work in the building. It's
okay.
not industrial in any way.
Well, I mean, there is an exemption, it's my understanding, for city use that the city can use something.
School district does not have to follow zoning, but the
Right.
use is the same, and that's going to be where my question is going to come in, is the code, the state can't look at zoning because not every city and not every area has zoning.
That's correct.
So it would have to look at use, therefore it doesn't matter what the school district building is zoned, the use is education office.
Right, and so there's not specifically enumerated factors for the permitting process. It doesn't say if there's a pet store within 1,000 feet, then you can't do it. What it is, it's qualitative, and it looks at various details in it. Like I say, once you're past that 500-foot simplified rule, then it's everything in the kitchen sink that's in the area, and you analyze all uses that are within that area. So, for example, if the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality or the EPA were to come in and they say, okay, well, first step, what information do you have about what's in the area? And so the first thing we would say on the application is, well, the first thing is that everyone around us is industrial. And although that may not be determinative, what's that?
That's not true.
No, as far as the classification, the neighbor there, I'm sorry, the classification of our neighbor is industrial. Is that going to be determinative? Not necessarily. However, is it a factor that they're going to consider when they do it? Yes. With regard to, kind of the thing, we can't control the zoning for our neighbors, that's absolutely a good point. We cannot control the zoning of our neighbors to a point. However, we are not the ones seeking to change the status quo. What we are doing is we have built in reliance on the way things currently lie. The neighbor is trying to maximize the value of the property that they currently own. We are trying to maintain the value of what we've already put in. What the City Council is seeking to determine is whether or not this is in the best interest. And the applicant's motion states, and I forget the exact wording, but it talks about that this is in the best interest. So what is the best interest? To disturb the status quo and allow it is not Third Coast's position that there is no benefit to the city of Pearland if they're able to put retail space along the front. It's not Third Coast's position that there's zero benefit to Pearland to classifying the back as planned use.
Would it be unfair to say that Third Coast's position as the current zoning is a detriment because 11 of the uses y'all would like removed are already allowed by right?
That we would prefer that if we're not, we would prefer that
they are allowed by right. I see
No,
you're saying they're not.
no, I'm not saying they're not. I'm saying I was put into a position of trying to come up with a compromise. Hey, what could you possibly do? And I said, well, how about these 11 things? Could you talk to the developer about that? No. And I got, how about building 11? How about only building 11? No.
So
let me just say that the negotiation is between you and them. And if if I came to you and said, I want you to stop manufacturing chemicals because your neighbor has decided that negatively affects the value of their land, and they're offering you nothing in return, I think I know what the answer would be. What they're asking to do is maximize their development. You're asking for us to limit their ability to maximize the development of their land and increase the value of it for the benefit of you, with y'all sacrificing nothing. At any point in time, your ability to purchase the land was there. If you wanted to maximize the protection, you could have done it via that. What you're asking us to do is negatively affect them so they don't negatively affect you without y'all having to actually compromise or give up anything. And no matter how you argue it, y'all have offered nothing in concession in exchange for what you're asking for them. You've not negotiated with them. You've not come to an agreement. You've not offered them anything in value that we've been made aware of to come to a compromise. And I cannot find a way that I can accept your proposal, which is to deny this PD, without there at least having been that discussion.
Not to mention there's other M1 that those 11 uses are allowed in surrounding it.
And that's, I mean, that's,
Currently.
that's the backup argument, is that it's not really affecting you. All this stuff, it was already allowed. The effect was already there. If this was of such concern, again, you could have bought the land and gotten yourself the buffer that you wanted by ownership. And I can tell you, that land's been sitting there for a while. I'm pretty sure the people who owned it were willing to sell it. So I just, and not to argue and not to belabor the point, but I think, the way, at least how I'm going to vote.
Well, and I think, you're probably right on some of that. The only thing I hate about it is it got to this point, in the conversation. I mean, take a company that's been here for a good while now, and with a lot of people, and a lot of Pearland people here, and now, effectively, you can put them out of business out of it. And the thing about it, I mean, any case in any place that we got around, if anybody's got a business, they have to go out and buy all the property around them in order to maintain it. But, to take a company that's been a good corporate citizen to sit, Pearland, and employ a lot of people, and to have this, come in and happen, and I guess, if I'm not mistaken, I think PDC, we're putting money into the roadway. How much?
We'll be rebuilding the city street. I think it's $800,000 roughly, don't quote me on that.
Yeah. And what we're going to get out of it? How much revenue we'll get out of that sales?
We have about 7 businesses on that street.
And I think part of the point would be that, but for PDC, having this opportunity to put money into it, this would be on the city's general fund dime to repair a street that's in deplorable shape.
Well, I'll agree with you, and that's part of the call on the PDC when it's put in there. 25% goes to the streets and what have you. So, I mean, that's a.
So, what would the compromise be? Change that to M2 and put M2 behind it? Educational office space?
Well, keep the thing that bothers me is, when they come in there and they're looking to expand their business as it is right now, and it's jeopardizing expanding business from what we heard previously of adding, at least another 50 people to work, which we need that within the Pearland area. And so that's my concern.
Well, my concern is they have a concern with 11 uses that have always been allowed.
Yeah, I get that.
And it's a shotgun approach to their own words at the state level. So we're aiming at what? There's no target.
Yeah, they get to describe exactly how they're negatively affected.
It's a possibility.
The uses, a lot of those uses were allowed already. The jeopardy already existed. They waited until this moment when it was brought to their attention to ask us to maintain status quo. But status quo was still an endangerment deal.
Well, if I can ask, can we pull up the site plan that shows the 11 buildings? Because if we look, underlying zone right now is all in one. When we look at the site plan for the back, for all the buildings in yellow, those are going to stay in one. So I guess if you're talking about underlying zone change and what can be there, we are changing the front 2 buildings going from an underlying base of M1 to GC. And so that is an underlying change. But that's the furthest parcel from there. So if I'm understanding Third Coast position correctly, even though that's 670-ish feet away, by that going from M1 to GC, that could have an effect? Is that
Yes.
correct?
Yes. With respect to a couple things that have been said. One, I hope is it this councilman's position that the only way to protect our property is to purchase everything around us.
I think that's not the only way. You could have negotiated with them and come up with a compromise and offered them something that they found attractive as a way for them to reposition what they wanted to do. I'm not saying that's the only tool in the toolbox, but to say that you had no tools is incorrect. At least there was that one tool. Or at least those 2 tools.
I will disagree. I will say in perpetuity, the only way to protect your property is to own the property around it. If we are going to have private property rights and the property owner has some level of control, and realize I am totally against that.
And I'm with you there. So a couple of things there. First, the purpose of zoning is to impinge on people's property rights. And so it's the same reason why I'm comfortable building a house in one area, because I'm relying on the zoning at the time I build my house that Third Coast isn't going to build a chemical plant next door. At the time the applicant purchased the property was zoned as it is. It is not us that is seeking to change the status quo. Like I said, it's not. And
no, you wanted to remove 11 uses that are currently allowed.
Okay, but
you did.
Okay,
We're venturing into.
Yeah.
Look,
I think we've said it.
At this point, we're venturing into debate. I think, and it's academic. I think most of us know how we feel about this. We understand your position. I apologize that y'all feel like y'all are negatively affected. I will just tell you, I cannot do what you're asking me to do because you're asking me to pick favors. I'm allowing these guys, I have to deal with theirs on the merit of their land, and I have not seen, as we do with every other application, an argument on your end that would make me change my mind. And again, I apologize y'all are negatively affected. Y'all been here for a while. We appreciate y'all as an employer, but for this, at least for my one of 6 votes, I'm going to vote for it because I think that is the best for this piece of land.
Okay, so the message going out now, if you have business, there's vacant land around you, go out and buy that vacant land and let it sit there. Don't ever develop it, don't ever do that. Just buy it up and leave it there. That's
You don't want anything developed around it?
that's the message we're sending out now. Go out, buy all the land around you, so nobody else can develop there.
I'm pretty sure that's why Dale bought most of Southern Missouri County.
I think we're ready to vote.
Let me just ask one thing.
What?
Yes, sir. This is not my environment. This is not what I do. I'm worried about jobs. If you're saying my fault, I didn't go out and reach out to the developer specifically. I used the city. I should have known not to. I should have gone to them directly to make them an offer. Postpone it. Give me an opportunity to go back to the developer and say, hey, can we sit down and get what you want, get what the city wants, and get what I want? And if we can't, then in 2 weeks, you say you vote your conscience. You want retail jobs over industrial jobs, you vote it. I'm fine with that. Give me a chance, but just postpone it.
I think we've discussed this topic for quite some time.
Okay.
But there's no permanence to this zone change. If you want to go and talk to them after we voted and say it's a positive vote, you can still go and negotiate and say, we'll pay for the zone change to give us this additional protection.
Well,
there's no permanence to this.
It's not a zone change, though. It's a PD. I mean, we cleared that up. Well, no,
If it's not a zone change,
This is a PD, this is a zone change.
Yes.
can we go ahead and vote?
I'm fine with postponing.
No, I think we need to make a motion.
I'll move to postpone.
Second.
Any further discussion on that item?
I'd like to get the applicants' input.
My name is Bobby Moore. I'm the owner of the property. I haven't heard from these guys. We've been working with the city for a year and a half on this. I'm sorry, you operate a chemical plant in the middle of a burgeoning city. When you talk about you have a use and buy the property around you, well, that only applies if you're operating a chemical plant. Otherwise, the market's changing, their property rights. I have no interest in negotiating with these guys at this point. I've owned the property several years. They've had many opportunities to come to me. I frankly don't know what this is about. I'll be extremely disappointed if this doesn't get considered tonight. I think this is an end run, and I think I find it revolting and bad form, among other things, and I respectfully ask that you approve my final application tonight. Thank you.
If I may add, I mean, we've seen this time and time again. We've told applicants, the neighbors, as a council, that they need to look at the property around them when they're building. I mean, this thing was already zoned M1. Councilman Carbone brought up a good point. I mean, this is over almost 700 feet away, the zone change. I don't know why we would wait, why we would postpone this specifically because they are just coming today saying, oh, well, it's going to affect our business. I mean, look at what's around you. You don't have to buy the land. You should know what's going on next to you. What is this land zoned as? I mean, yes, we're changing a small portion of it, but for the most part, it's remaining M1. And so, like he said, I mean, he's only for 7 years. You're just now talking to this guy. I mean, we're kind of late now at this point. So I don't see why we would postpone this, but it sounds like it might end up being postponed.
Well, no, after hearing this, I don't think the two parties are going to come to an agreement.
I have no desire to postpone.
Yes, sir.
I think we have a motion second on floor, but does everybody agree to that after all this talk? Okay, we do have a motion second on floor, Mr. Secretary. Postpone.
Councilmember Ordino?
No.
Councilmember Rhodes?
At this point, no.
Councilmember Perez?
No.
Councilmember Owens?
This is the postpone.
Yes.
Councilmember Ball?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Motion to postpone failed 4-2. Councilmember Moore?
Okay, we've got a motion to, we're now a motion to take a motion to resolve this issue at this point. Okay. I do make the motion to, okay, we'll start with that.
This is not on the postpone, right?
Correct. This is ordinance 417.
No.
Councilmember Carbone?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Aye. Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little?
No.
Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Motion passed 4-2. Motion ends on 2016. Councilmember Moore after.
Okay. With that motion and Mother Nature has moved on, let's move on our agenda. Item number 12. Councilmember Camone.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, resolution R 2017-17.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report.
Thanks, sir. The city's had a long-standing project to begin improving Independence Park. This what's before you is the first phase of that. It involves a lot of earthwork, we call it band shell, the entertainment area, specific word. Some of the utilities that are there, trying to get a new entrance off of Pearland Parkway. So this really helps set the stage, somewhat literally, for a lot of improvements. It's important to note, I think, that the financing for this has already been put in place with the sale of the debt financing. Majority of this under the 07 bond issue authority. And also note, we need support to get going on this. Construction prices probably being in flux, so this was bid before Harvey, so we're locked in on this and look forward to seeing the work go forward.
Council, have any questions or comment on this item? I'm glad to see that worked out, as we did on this. Okay. Hearing no opposition, we have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Carbone? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Ordino?
Aye.
Councilmember Little? Councilmember Perez?
Aye.
Councilmember Owens?
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0 with Councilmember Little absent from the chambers as well as Councilmember Moore. That was resolution 27-27.
Moving in our agenda to item number 13, Councilmember Reed, Chief of the Office.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration of possible action, resolution number R 2017-172, so moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. We're in discussion. Staff report on this item.
So, Mr. Mayor and Council, under the agreements for the MUD districts, certain of them are required to come to the city when they're seeking additional bond financing authority. MUD 6 has come to us with that. The city's scope for our review is fairly limited. But we did talk to them, and they worked with us, and they limited the term limits of the bond issue, which we think is a positive, and seeking your consideration, and they are here if there are any questions.
Okay. Council has a question or comment on
Mayor, we've seen this item before, and I went down the line of questioning. That's why it failed last time. Thank Mr. Coker for organizing a phone call or conference call to resolve some of my issues, or at least answer some of my questions. I guess one item, they provided some additional information, but they were going to bring, what was that, TCQ application? I don't know if the attorneys were here.
Thank you, Councilman. We actually don't have a copy of a report with us tonight. And you might imagine our office is in a bit of flux, as I'm sure y'all's is the last few weeks. And that's my mistake. But if I did have one to show you, it would be 3 or 4 binders about that.
That's all the questions I have.
Finish your comments. Any other comments from council?
Yeah. So I was not at the meeting, but I did watch the video. I kind of shared the concern, not being privy to the conference call. To be honest, Councilmember Carbone, if you feel like it's been answered in a satisfactory manner, then I'm okay moving forward without having to dig into the detail. But I do think that it's something we need to be conscious of in the future. Is this clear differentiation between what we're paying on our end for our bond counsel and what the MUD seem to be charged for their bond counsel. So as long as Councilmember Carbone feels like it was answered, then I'm okay moving forward.
Any other comments from council? Hearing none. We have a motion second on the floor, Mr. Secretary.
Councilmember Reed.
No.
Councilmember Wardlow.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Carl.
No.
Resolution 2017-172 approved 4-0. 4-2. Morehouse and Chambers.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman.
That information in the record. Let's move to item 14. And that's Councilmember Perez if he would present this for consideration.
Thank you, Mayor. Consideration possible action, resolution number 2017-181. So moved.
Second.
Motion and second.
Oh, okay, motion and second. Okay, staff report.
Thanks, sir.
I didn't pick up the other.
City's had a long-standing win-win cooperation with Pearland Independent School District, whereby the city places our officers into the schools. They're able to be resources in many senses of the word for working with the staff there, on any range of issues, public safety-wise, in the school property and the buildings. Each year we go back through, and this year we've tried to make sure that it's equitable and also covering the costs for the officers. We did tweak the agreements such that schools are paying portion share more of their officers' leave time, because really these officers are, as you can imagine, have to use their leave time, school holidays, so that they're in sync. And so they've already, I believe the PISD has already approved that. and recommend that for your consideration tonight.
Okay, council have any question or comment on this item? Hearing none, we do have a motion and a second on the floor. Secretary.
Councilmember Perez.
Aye.
Councilmember Owens.
Aye.
Councilmember Pearl.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Little.
Aye.
Motion passed 5-0. Councilmember Orville and Moore absent from chamber.
Okay. Let's move on our agenda to item 15, and Mr. Leonard to pick this up for us.
Thanks, Mr. Grant. Council asks for discussion item. We provided Mr. Upton and his staff just general background on the rules, regulations, process. We work with the school districts each year, summertime, on school walk zones and busing. And so, it's really in council's hands. We're here to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll come with a question on this item. I believe I'm going to read that as your issue, I believe.
Well, actually, I'll defer to see if anybody else has it.
All yours.
Really, the discussion portion of it was, I just wanted to see where our speed limits differ in front of certain school zones. I know we have our major thoroughfares and then our secondary thoroughfares. We have a number of schools that are on major thoroughfares, and I wanted us to at least consider reducing the speed limit on some of those streets with major thoroughfares. I know Councilman Wardno is completely against reducing any speed limits, but the city's not the same as it was, 25 years ago.
No, more traffic and more people move.
Well, and so, yeah, there is more traffic and there's more people to move, but Houston has more traffic and way more people to move, and they consistently move it at 35 miles an hour. I'm not saying reduce our speed limit to 35 miles an hour, but at the same time, maybe that's an improvement of traffic when you don't have everybody trying to rush to one specific light or trying to, get through. You have more control over the speed and the changing of lights and that kind of thing. And so, I don't know. Our staff would probably be the better people to ask. Trent or somebody on his staff would be better people to ask on how lowering the speed limit in certain areas would help. But I do know that, for instance, on Magnolia, we do reduce the speed limit, and it's not consistent across the board. We reduce the speed limit. Hold on one second. We reduce the speed limit. Not you, Trent. Councilman Wardno. We reduce the speed limit because the school is there, and we do reduce the speed limit. We don't.
It's not because of the school, it's because there's houses that face the road.
Okay, we reduce the speed limit in the school right before the school zone starts, and then we increase it again. But where there are houses facing the road on 518, and you get by Jameson, the speed limit does not reduce. No, it doesn't. It doesn't reduce. It stays.
I'm trying to think of the driveway that comes
It stays.
up 518.
There's a house that faces. There's one house that faces, maybe two that face 518 right there. They kind of set off to the back, but the speed limit does not reduce. Also, before you get coming from City Hall going west, the speed limit on 518 is 40 miles an hour. Then when you get past the tracks, past 35, and it goes up to 45 miles an hour. I mean, there's no consistency with our speed limits just in general across the board, but relative to where they are in front of different schools across the city. I mean, that's my main concern. So I guess it's twofold. The first thing would be we need some consistency as to our speed limits across the city. If we're going to do 45 on 518, it needs to be 45 all the way down. You know, we have, like I said, if you go back and check, you look at it right now, it's 40 miles an hour, everything east of 35 on 518. It's 40 miles an hour.
It's 45 from roughly the Friendswood city limits down to 35, and then at 30, or actually it's in Old Town where Old Town starts. It goes to 40, and then as you described, back on the other side, Old Town, it goes to 45.
So why are we reducing it right there? I mean, is there a reason for the reduction?
Well, those are, that being 518, that's going to be set by TxDOT. And so TxDOT has their speed studies that are done, and their street maps, and those are set by TxDOT. Since we own the area after 2288, then that area is then governed by what we want to set, or by the speed studies that are set in there.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about just after 288. I'm talking about throughout the whole city. So,
yes, sir. Yes, and I'm just giving you an example on that. On 2234, for example, those are also run by TxDOT as well. So anyone you have an FM road or a state highway, those are governed by TxDOT. Anything then off of that would then be set by the prima facie rule that set at 30 miles an hour unless a speed study is done that dictates that. So then you take a look at the other rules. You mentioned Magnolia, for example. Magnolia was done as a speed study several years ago. That was taken into effect, one of some contributing factors, one being one of the goals of maintaining a 20 mile an hour on the school zone, but that really wasn't dictated by that. That was more dictated by the curvature of the road. And then putting forth the speeds before council, council chose to lower the speed limit by 5 miles an hour, which is allowed by the rules that we govern on our transportation codes, is that you have the ability, once the speed limit is determined or the speed study is set, you have the ability to plus or minus 5 miles an hour on that. And so then you set the corridor, council set the corridor at that time, and not just the area that the staff had recommended. Council decided to set it the entire way from McLean to Hart as that corridor of 35 miles an hour.
And why did council do that? Was it because of homes facing the road?
There's a little bit of that.
That's all. I was here then, so I thought I'd help Robert out. So while the curve in the road was the dictating factor on why a segment in there needed to drop down to I think it's 35. Basically, the radius on that curve dictated setting it at 35 miles an hour. Instead of having it drop to 35 miles an hour and then jump back up on both sides of that, the direction was let's basically carry that from intersection to intersection, so you're not having in between the intersections, speeding up and slowing down. Because when you do the speed studies and the 85th percentile is determined by the speed studies, we do have that leeway of 5 miles an hour up or down from the 85th percentile. So if you go to the question on FM 518, we'd have to go back and look at the specifics of the TxDOT study and whether or not the drop to 40 miles an hour for that segment was specifically driven by what the 85th percentile was, or they looked at that segment and said more frequent driveways, more conflict points because of the frequency of driveways, and so then taking the discretion to drop that, to 5 miles an hour allowed from the 85th percentile. But it all starts with the speed study. Anytime you're going over the 30 mile an hour prima facie speed limit, it starts with the speed study, and it basically measures what does traffic normally drive at. It's defined as the 85th percentile is what people drive at. The 85th percentile of people drive at under normal conditions as a reasonable and prudent speed for that particular road. And that establishes that, and you go up or down from that based on other factors.
So as a council, though, we can go up or down based on, where this is coming from is we've defined, since I've been on council and even beforehand, Pearland as a family-oriented city, right? So there's a lot of people with kids, just a lot of families living out here. But then on the flip side, you have the the elderly community that also still walks and walks across the street. I mean, we 45 miles an hour. I mean, that's again. I bring up Houston. I mean, Houston is way bigger, way more people. But it's 35. It's 35 on Westheimer. It's 35 on Richmond. It's 35 on Maine. It's 35 on Travis, Fannin, Milam, Smith. I mean, we can go on and on. There's no 45 miles an hour. And so where I really have a problem with it though is in front of schools, because we can only reduce by 15 miles an hour, right? So we're going from 45 to 30. Well, I mean, that's what safety are we providing for our residents? Not just children, but obviously the schools for children, but for the elderly as well. Now, obviously for generally speaking, you're not gonna have a school zone kick in across from Autumn Leaves or some retirement village, but I think we should be more conscious going forward of things like that, specifically, like I said, at least starting with school zones, or in that area where we have a number of schools, or even if there's not a number of schools, just where we know that there's going to be a lot of people, a lot of students crossing the street. Unless you can tell me that, hey, look, we can go from 45 to 20 or to 25, and go past that 15 mile an hour difference. Councilman Warner was shaking his head, so I'm thinking that that's not a possibility without lowering the actual speed limit. And so that's where I'm coming from. I think it should be consistent across the city, though, across the entire city. I mean, maybe it's 40 miles an hour that we choose.
But it's we can't just choose. We have to do the speed studies, and then we have the discretion to go above or below what the speed study says about 5 miles an hour. So I don't know what Houston does. I don't know whether they follow the statutes or they arbitrarily set it. But
well, Dallas does the same thing. I mean, Austin.
Let me chime in with that. So to kind of back up what staff is saying, we do not have the ability to. The state doesn't give us the ability to just set the speed limit without justification. We have to order a speed study. We have to have a traffic engineer go out and do the measurements, do the counts. In that speed study, we're going to measure how traffic moves and flows. You brought up a couple of roads, and I think they're good points because they are thoroughfares, they are textile roads, but they have significantly lower speeds. FM 1960, FM 1093, which is Westheimer, Main Street, which is 35 north of the town. There are slower speeds because there's factors that actually contribute to the slower speeds. The 85th percentile gets moved down. They have driveways very close to each other. So movements in and out. As those people are turning in and out, it slows the through traffic. So it is unsafe in those conditions to raise it because you're increasing the propensity for an accident. In our situation, you're actually, by arbitrarily lowering the speed, you actually increase the propensity for an accident because people will want to move faster. When we do traffic impact analyses, when we do studies, we measure how well a road or intersection is performing based on delay. We rate it based on delay. If we see more delay, the road is performing less than ideal. And when we see a lot of delay on a road that we can't justify through the speed study, we negatively rate that road. And that causes us to want to or need to have improvements. The improvements are rarely raising the speed limit. It's usually either looking at timing or widening lanes. So I think it's a good conversation to have. Somewhat, our hands are somewhat tied. The tools that we have are likely not going to lead to the conclusion that you want, which is we can modify those speed limits significantly. Specifically on 35, on 2234, on 518, and on Cullen, that's 865. We can't change those. The state has the only authority. The only authority we have on Broadway is west of 288 because it's no longer FM 518 there. So those roads we don't have the ability to make any change.
So I understand we can't make changes on certain parts of the city, and that's fine. I'm sure we can petition or do something to try to get those changes made. I know we don't just stand idly by while the state just controls everything we do in the city of Pearland. Councilman Ordino wouldn't go for that. And so I'm pretty positive that there's something that we can do. Mark can, tell me if I'm wrong, but there's something that we can do to make those changes, or petition to have things done the way that we would like them done. As far as the curbs, the turn-ins, again, I go back to this not being Pearland 25 years ago. I mean, when you go down 518, there's hundreds of curbs or whatever it is, turn-ins. I mean, there's a whole bunch of places to turn in and stop. I mean, so it's the development over the last 25 years has changed the city tremendously to where you can't tell me that, if we go slower, if we go 45 miles an hour, then we're going to have a whole lot of accidents. That's crap. I mean, there would be accident after accident in the city of Houston then. That's my reference point. But there are a lot of accidents in Houston. There's accidents in Pearland too. A lot of accidents in Pearland. Places where we don't have curbs. What I'm getting to is, and that was the whole reason for adding it. I mean, this body wants to vote against it, so be it. I guess what I'm asking is that we look into at least lowering our speed limits, specifically around schools, all schools, not schools on the other side of 288, not schools on 518, not just school on Cullen or school on Pearland Parkway, at least by 5 miles an hour, because they're all 45, besides the one that's already, has the luxury of being 35 miles an hour, which lowers the speed limit to 20. Well, there's a number of them that are like that, but off major thoroughfares. Really, I'm talking about major thoroughfares.
So if the council wants us to review all speed limit sign or speed zones around schools, so we can look at that, and it has to start with doing a speed study, and then we'll bring back to you guys is the data and the recommendation of this is the 85th percentile. But there are going to be areas, and I'll use an example that doesn't have a school, South Fork in the county. If we were to go do a speed study out there, it would say set that at 40, or it would probably say set it at 45 miles an hour with the leeway to go up to 50 or 40 or down to 40. So there's going to be, I think, other areas that come back with a similar result. But that's the way for us to start that process if that's a direction we want to head in. I think it's a good practice long term to re-examine these areas as we grow, as traffic patterns change. But really, to date, what we've been able to accomplish from a budgetary and a staff standpoint is when we complete a new roadway, let traffic normalize, then do the speed study, and then adopt the ordinance. If there are significant changes out there, we've in the past looked at whether we needed to do a new study and update, re-look at that particular area. But there's going to be situations where we look at it, and it's the speed study is going to show some stuff possibly coming down, other stuff is going to show possibly going up.
I can't imagine the cost of us doing a citywide speed study.
Well, I think we'd have to determine some priorities and do them one by one as
But collectively, even if we did them one by one, which is less efficient, I can't imagine the cost. Actually, I can, but it's a lot. What we can do is this. I think the first step to having better tools and better mechanisms in order to be able to deal with these more quickly is for us to have an on-staff traffic engineer who can produce these speed studies in-house. That gives us a little bit more control and a little bit more, get us more direct input from our own staff and more ability to be able to modify as things change to the different traffic conditions. I think that's the first step for me. It's not ordering a citywide speed study or even 75% or all thoroughfares. I mean, we would probably pay for the traffic engineer for 3 or 4 years for us to be able to fund that. So if we want to move in that direction, I would say let's look at, in next year's budget, let's add the traffic engineer that I think we've needed for a while now. And then we have the ability to be more nimble about what we want to do with our traffic system to include the speed limits.
One thing we can do on there, Liberty, I guess, over to 35, which you have 5 signals. I find it hard for anybody to get to 45, especially from 8 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock at night. Now, the state would be very happy if we went ahead and took over 518, and they would do it and bring it up to ANSCO standards and maintenance on it for 5 years, and then after that, everything's ours. That's been offered previously. And I don't know if it's just that one or the other, but they're in a position now that they would love for you to take them over.
I'd rather them pay for
I bet that we can't pay for our own road.
They would love to do that, but they'll bring it up to ASHTO standards and on there do maintenance for 5 years and then give it to the city.
If we can go for tax increases to cover the maintenance that'll be needed, I'm all for it, but we don't have the money. You know, my 2 comments are, if I remember correct, both school districts agreed with the ordinance for the school zones. I've said it with MUDs, I've said it with other groups, we don't want the state telling us what to do. If the school districts are okay with it, they're kind of the experts on students and education. Then if we're truly worried about this, let's petition the state to actually increase transportation funding for school districts so we can actually bus more kids in, get traffic off the road, get parents that are waiting in neighborhoods to pick up their kids 2 hours before school out of the way and solve a lot of problems. But I think 1984 was the last time the state changed their funding for transportation of students.
Well, so you just mentioned school zones. I was saying the speed limits around school zones. Now,
but
I mean,
they directly correlate.
Well, the school zone
is set by the school, by the speed limit.
No. The school zone discussion topic was more of expanding some school zones or lengthening some school zones. The speed limit topic was speed limits across the city and specifically within areas where there are schools. And so, I know that the school zones can only be 15 miles less than a posted speed limit. So, but with respect to the extension of certain school zones, I mean, that's a whole nother topic, a whole nother day. It's tough just getting through this one. But I agree with Councilman Perez on not necessarily not spending money on a study, but more or less hiring an actual traffic engineer in-house and not necessarily having to. Well, but he's part-time. He's great, but I mean he's not full-time for the city.
He's not great. Okay.
No, he's great. He's great.
I'll put that on there.
And so, I think that probably would ease up a lot of us having to spend money down the road. But I don't know that I want to postpone this until 2018 or 2019. That's maybe if we started with small segments. Again, I don't know what the cost is, or that we even have the money in this year's budget to do it. But I guess that's kind of where I was coming from. That's why I asked for this to be added to the agenda and for us to discuss it. It doesn't really seem like it's something that the body as a whole is looking to go forward with. So I don't know what do we do from here.
I think that started giving some guidance on traffic speeds. Maybe said a 30 mile an hour zone, but the new 30 is 45 now.
Mayor, can I just add?
Regardless where you are, it's 45 over.
Staff put together a 9-page memo that when you drive around town, speed limits seem haphazard, but after reading through this, there's a lot of thought behind it all. I don't see any, my opinion is I don't see any reason to change what staff has presented and how we're going about it. Do I want to get a funded position for a traffic engineer? Yes, sir. But as of what we're doing right now, is there any changes? After reading the memo, I can't say that I would be in favor of any changes right now.
Agreed.
I think what we're taking away from this.
Fair, did a good job on that.
I think what we're taking away from this is that next year we need to have an item for a traffic engineer, in-house traffic engineer. I think that's a good first step.
Any more comments? You want to talk about plan development? Why don't we switch on down to plan development, ask Clay to make a few preliminary comments on that.
Sure, thank you. So likewise, on the plan developments, we were asked to review the process and the requirements and how it's been used over time. The plan developments were very specific trade-offs in the development process. And so we've got an inventory of those, and really a question for council, how you want to proceed, any changes to the text, or how you, if you'd like to make any changes there.
I think that's one of Perez, Councilmember Perez concerns. You'll leave that off?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I think where my concern has been is the use of this tool. I think we all will have different opinions about how effective the use of the PD has been in the past. I personally think it's an overused tool, and we need to restrict how often we go to that process for zone change, for things that are allowed in, or for uses that are allowed in other zones. But again, I'm just one member of the body. I think that maybe an appropriate way to move forward with this, and a successful model that's already been established, is to do something similar to what we did with the CUPs, and maybe we recall the same committee that went through the CUP process, went through all the criteria, worked with staff, and got some community input to see what if anything we want to change, and then we begin to bring that to council.
Any comments on that?
I'm not really sure that there was a problem with the plan development process. I mean, or any delay. I mean, I know the CUP process, but I think I'm not really. I don't see the value in us doing the same thing unless we're specifically saying we don't want P&Z to. Basically, what we said before, we don't want P&Z to cause us to not, or to have to use a supermajority. I mean, because that's essentially what we did last time. So if that's what you're saying, I mean, if you want a body to get together to talk about that, we can just vote on it. But I don't see, I haven't heard any complaints about our plan development process.
There are a lot of complaints. There are a god-awful lot of complaints. The PD process has been the tool that I think in the development community has led to the greatest amount of confusion and the greatest amount of expense without a necessary path to whether or not they're going to get the use that they want, because they're going to get the changes that they want. Now, I'm not saying that we need to change on behalf of council. I certainly have my opinion, but there are a lot of people that are not pleased with how often the PD process is used. I think our staff has been doing the best they can with the guidance that they've been given up to this point. And right now, I think that we could use have an opportunity to, similar to what we did with the CUP, just have an open discussion with the committee and talk about, is there anything that we did want to change? Because there are some issues with the PD. And again, I think it's overused. I think it's been inappropriately used. And I wouldn't want to make any changes without having a committee discussion to find out what we want to do.
The staff members, Clay, do you have any comments on that particular?
No, I mean, I hear the sentiment. To me, it's been used for a few specific areas. They're trying to get the highest quality development overall for the city. It's not a regular go-to. We can do anything or nothing.
Was it used 3 times this year?
I think that's yes, sir. Yeah.
I haven't heard any comments from the developers. This is where they might have concerns. Are you talking about mostly the staff's developer or the council?
I think since I've been on council, I've heard from everybody who's been the applicant.
They don't have to go through the PD process.
No, they don't. But our staff has requested of them to go in the PD process. For those who are not sophisticated developers and don't know what that process entails, they're following staff's guidance. Staff is following our guidance, and they get into, similar to the developer on Garden Road, a PD process that we really don't need to go through. We gave him, when he was here, guidance, a zone change would be appropriate, and then we voted in favor of the zone change. The zone change should have been, in my opinion, what went to first as opposed to the PD. But how do we give that instruction to staff? How do we fairly tell them this is a new direction we'd like them to go, or here are our concerns with how this PD is being used, and when we do and when we do not want to use that tool. And I think that, again, we faced that problem with the CUP. We wanted to give them guidance to deal with some concerns that we were hearing in the community, and I think that committee model worked very well. Obviously, I have strong opinions, but I want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to voice their opinions, and we end up with something conclusive that everybody can agree with. If it is everything should remain status quo, then we talk it through and we remain comfortable with where we are.
I mean, I agree on the Garden Road or Max Road PD, and that. So I think there has been some overuse in the past. I don't know the best way to communicate that to staff. I mean, after going through the CUP process, I think there was some great outcome there. I'd go through it again if the council wanted to. I guess from staff's perspective, is there any? How can we give input? I mean, in terms of is the PD tool being overused? And really, the fear I have is I can see a slide where we only did 8 and 16 and 3 and 17, but how many folks turned away, or how many developments did we not even see because they were told to do a PD and they just put their hands up and went to Brentsville or somewhere else? And that's always hard to quantify.
As far as we know, we haven't lost anybody because of that. The issue with the PD, obviously, is that it's a special zoning district, right? It's to correct the allowance of a use that isn't allowed by right today in that zoning district. So there's usually two options. You can seek a rezoning of the property, or if it's a use that maybe our code doesn't really see at all, doesn't really fit, then a PD would be the other option. And so it is a special tool. It does take more because you're basically writing a new zoning district. You're creating a specific zoning district to serve that property. So it is a little bit bigger hoop to go through. We're not always going to recommend a zoning change because the future land use map doesn't push us to do that, right? So we're going to recommend to you zoning changes that fit with the future land use map. Now, currently, staff is going through a review of the future land use map to make sure that it really is in compliance with where we think Pearland wants to be, and we foresee in the future bringing an amendment to the comp plan for that future land use map forward to try to clean that up and make it a little bit easier to work with. But ultimately, the plan development is a very useful tool, but it should be about a couple of things. One, it's a unique project. It brings something to Pearland that we haven't seen before, or that we haven't necessarily envisioned, but we would like to see here. Or two, maybe it's a use that we think is good for an area, but we don't want to rezone the entire area. We don't want to take too large of a parcel and take it out of what it is and make it something else. So this allows us that tool to do that. I think ultimately it's about making sure that staff realizes that we need to meet one of those two goals. Ultimately, it is the applicant's right to apply for a PD. They're the ones who ultimately submit the paperwork, pay the fee, and we'll move forward based on that. Now, yes, there are times we give them guidance on what's the best way to do, but just like they listen to their architects, their engineers, their attorneys, we're just one voice for them. We always tell them that no matter what you do, you have to go to the commission, you have to go to council, they'll make the ultimate decision.
So from my perspective, I do think it's a special zone and it's an important tool. It's an important tool to use on developments where we do not have a zone that fits it. The town center is a great example of that type of use where we don't have a zone, or we would want to create a zone that allows that type of mixed use development. The Ivy District, when that moves forward, It's a mixed-use development. We don't have a zone that allows that, so we create a special zone for that. Where we've used it in the past is this use is not allowed here. We tell the applicant we want to go ahead and ask you to do a PD. Though the use would be allowed in other zones, in that PD process, while they're simply wanting to get an understanding of whether use would be allowed, they're having to compromise on increased landscaping, an increase in facade materials, things that aren't pertinent to their development. To be honest with you, for something like the project in Garden Road, I'm comfortable with the provisions of the UDC as they exist. They just want to be able to know whether the use is allowed, and using the PD as a tool for a development which is really the only thing that is of concern is the use, I think is not an appropriate use of tool. And I think most of the ones that we've seen lately have been use related. They have not been, there is no category for what they're developing here. I think the one on Dixie Farm that came in that ended up failing was they wanted a zone change with a bunch of built-in variances. That I don't think is an appropriate use of that tool. They should have said, we want a zone change to multifamily, and they would have gotten a very quick no, because essentially that's what they were. So again, these are my opinions. I think that the tool should be used more sparingly than it has been. From the development community, I can tell you they're very, very expensive to put together. They're not cheap. You have to call into a lot of consultants to be able to address a lot of the questions that staff have. Staff has to ask the questions. They want to present something that they think is of value. But have we given you all guidance of how do we want to dwindle this down? And when we're asking people, particularly people who are not developers and don't know who to call and don't know who to ask, when we're suggesting to them to go through this PD process, and they end up spending $30,000 to $40,000, and all they want to know is, can I get this use? I think we've done them a disservice. And this is not a staff issue, and I want to make sure that I'm clear about this. I don't question the path that y'all have gone on, because that is the guidance that y'all have been provided by this council, previous council. What I'd like to do is let's collectively get together and find out whether we want to adjust the guidance and give you the tools that you need to find out whether we want to continue to use this tool the way we have been using it.
I would just say that ultimately, I think it's our role to offer suggestions and options to the development community. If they come in and they want to use a piece of property and it's not zoned that way, and the future land use map doesn't show rezoning conformance with what they want to do, then what we would suggest is you can move forward with the rezoning, or you have this other tool or PD. But ultimately, again, we can let them know what options are available, what it takes to move forward on those options, but that's ultimately going to be their choice of what to do. If they want to spend the money, and they realize that. Every developer prefers straight zoning, knowing what's there, knowing what the rules are, being able to go in and know what they have to face and what they can build under those rules up front. Putting that money together, or putting the pack together, spending the money to put a PD together, go through rezoning, and putting the project on hold, it's not what any developer obviously wants to do. They'd rather go in there and just find a piece of property that fits their needs. But in the end, if they want to come into Pearland and the zoning isn't there, they have those options and they can decide which one they want to move forward.
Mayor, if I could, the only suggestion I might add to what John just said was you could do the committee stand that up or something similar to that again and go through that whole review. Or I'm sure in the PD section there's a preamble that says a PD is suited for X and Y kind of thing, and maybe we can take a look at that, get some text, and run that through JPH and council or wherever, just to try to convey what types of things that we're hearing that should be appropriate for it, so that it doesn't get misapplied or misunderstood or anything else like that. So, as an alternative, or suggestion.
As much as y'all all know, I love zoning. If we're going to have zoning, which people said yes they want it, you have to have a tool like a PD, because staff has to work off either a future land use map or the current
Well,
land
I'm
use
suggesting
zone.
we remove the tool.
I understand. So you've got to give them guidance there. I'll be honest, we need a future land use map, but how much do I trust them? It depends on what the markets do. I mean, that's really what drives all this in the end. So I don't know if, from my vantage point, the committee with the CUP made some marginal changes. I still don't like where we are with that either. And a PUD, I think, does need to go outside of the UDC document, because it is a different type of tool. Now, I'll be honest, I would be upset with staff, even though I don't like PDs. Piece of property my family was trying to develop, they told me they were going to go the PD route, and I said no. You're going to go zoning, because I understand what the PD can do. And it does give a lot of power to to say this is what you're going to build there. And this body has told staff we want a pretty city, we want a nice city. So I would be upset with staff if they didn't use that PD tool to get where they have been directed to go, which is high-end development.
I think that's what the UDC is for.
Well, then we need to relook at the UDC and just
certainly do that.
do away with PUDs and go everything CUP.
Now, the PUD, again, nobody's saying that the PUD is not a useful tool.
But it's a useful tool because you can go down and dictate things that are outside of the UDC.
And when is it okay to do that? Is it okay to do that if the only concern is a use? So we tell somebody, you're on Garden, you want to put a storage unit, we can, the zone change, if you got a zone change from, say, GB to GC, you could get that, but you could also go to a PD and get your use change, but you could also, we could also completely wipe any zoning on that land and start from scratch, and you don't even know by the time you get through your $40,000 expense in the PD whether your use is going to be allowed. The PD is appropriate, in my opinion. You've got Lakes of Highland Wind, you've got Shadow Creek, you've got Country Place, you've got places that they want to do something unique there, and they're willing to sacrifice something to get something. And the PD is the only tool that really allows us to do that. But these small, if you look at the map, all of these light green areas, all of these small little pockets, those are PDs. Those are small developments where we have the ability to zone change it for retail use, and it only is a retail use, but they've gone and done a PD because that's the guidance we've given them.
Yes, to do things outside of the UDC and above and beyond the requirements of the UDC.
So you're saying
that has been the direction of this body. If you listen to the HEB discussion, if you listen to several.
I've listened to the HEB
so
discussion.
that has been the direction of this body.
The HEB discussion is a good example. That was not pro-PD. That was very anti.
I have brought up multiple times removing color palettes, removing a lot of stuff. No support. The direction of this body has been higher.
That's fine.
Standards.
But if
so
we're going to have,
that is,
if we're going to raise, no, it's not the PD. It's the UDC. That if we want to raise the standards, we raise everything all at once, as opposed to pocket by pocket by pocket.
Well, I'm definitely against that, because then we're going to squash all development, because the standards will be that high throughout the city, not just in small pockets.
And I'm also with you. But if you're talking about raising quality of the city, you're not going to do it by piece, this 5 acres and that 5 acres. You're going to do it by raising the water for all the folks, not one at a time. My only suggestion is that we have an opportunity to discuss it and find out if there's anything we want to change. If we don't want to change it, then fine. I'm fine with that. But I have heard numerous complaints from citizens. I've heard numerous complaints from numerous council members that have been on this, that are currently on this council and that previously on this council about the misuse of the I think we owe it to the citizens and to our staff to, if we want to change this, what do we want to change it to? To give them better guidance. If we get to the end and we say, look, everything's hunky-dory and we like what it is, then fine. but I don't want to do it without the discussion.
Anybody have any other comments on this item? If not, looking at my agendas, one of the items down the west said new business continued, and we don't have to continue business. Instead of other business, we're going on that. But the last one says adjourn, and we've got one of those. So I shall so do so at 8:48.